Well, welcome.
Yeah, good morning and welcome. Yes, thank you for coming, Jenna. Thank you for hosting us.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Kind of excited to share a lot of information to you about what's going on in the housing market today, mentality of buyers, sellers, how we think you should be working to strategize to maximize what is likely your largest investment that you have made in your home. And we have a great panel here today to help us kind of share a little bit about how each one of them adds to the team or the process that we go through, again, to help you maximize the return on your investment in the sale of your home. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Stephanie Hevezi. I'm with Connect California Homes. I am a realtor. This is Dustin Ma. He is with Lamppost Financial Planning. Dustin is a financial advisor. This is Jenna Gray. She is with Guaranteed Rate and knows all things mortgage lending and interest rate. My partner in crime here, Jenny Shablock, also a realtor with Connect California Home. Cody Wallace is with Brothers Inspections, and they are a pest inspection company, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about home inspections and pest inspections and inspections in general. And then Donna Piper with Old Republic Title, talking to us about escrow, title, and how the first set of us here, we get you kind of into the red zone, and then Donna with title and escrow, they take over and they actually get you through to the end zone and the finish line. So this is how this collective team and effort helps you throughout the process. So I'm going to, we're going to have a panel discussion. If you have questions that are really relevant to the topic at hand, go ahead and, jump in. If it's a personal question and you feel you'd rather wait till the end and have private one-on-one conversations with any of the panelists, we'll make all of ourselves available for that. Before we begin, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the market in general, because I know everyone is kind of interested and we hear things on the news and we're curious about, what's going on. So by show of hands, who thinks this is a buyer's market? Betty? Who thinks it's a seller's market? Okay.
No, not really.
Okay.
Obviously, the market is changing.
The market is changing. If we're so heart and head, gut instinct data, these are all things that we evaluate. If we're looking strictly at the numbers, technically it's still a seller's market. And why we say that is because of the number, it's the assumption rate, it's the number of homes on the market for buyers to be buying. Currently in this local area, we're at about 2.2 months of inventory for buyers. What is considered a balanced market is if we have somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 5 or 6, maybe 4, but generally 5 or 6 months of inventory, says it's a balanced market between buyers and sellers. We're currently here locally about 2.2. If we look back a year ago, it was 0.9. Okay, so things have changed even in the last 12 months. A number of other things that have changed in the last year about the market. Number of days on market is up from a year ago, even from 6 months ago. List price is actually down versus where we were 6 months ago, a year ago. So it's really important to know the numbers, to see what's going on. And then again, we're all here to strategize together to help you combat that or prepare the best strategy to help you execute upon your goals. So I want to jump in now with our panel discussion, now that we've talked a little bit about the market. And I feel even before you consider speaking with a realtor about possibly selling your home, you should speak with a financial advisor. So Dustin.
Hi, Stephanie.
Tell me, where do we start? Someone comes to you and says, I'm toying with the idea of selling. Where do we start?
So I think oftentimes when you're looking to buy or sell, and I think, oh, let me talk to a realtor, let me talk to a lender. And I think really the conversation starts with a financial advisor.
Great.
And that's because we really want to understand the why, understand the context of what you're doing, why you're doing it. Because when you understand the why, then you got to make better decisions through that path. And so, we gotta consider so many different things when we're thinking about that why, right? Are we moving because of geography? Are we moving because of lifestyle, affordability? Maybe we're older and we've now outgrown this area. We want to go somewhere else. Maybe it's senior living,
Same story.
same story, yeah. Or just communal living. Maybe it's nursing home, or kids are off to college, we could downsize. Exactly. Or hey, we want to move closer to the kids. Kids have moved out of state, we got to move there. So a lot of different reasons, and we really understand why that is, because again, take better steps. And so, we're talking about selling. So let's say you sell the house.
Yeah.
Then what, right? What's your lifestyle going to look like? Are you leaving your friends and family? What's the community you're walking into? Maybe you're living near your kids and they don't want you nearby, right? So there's so many different things we got to think about. Right? Like, Mom, we're trying to get away from you, but just because you move, life is going to change. So you really want to think through those steps of what is life going to look like. Along with that, the cost analysis before you move, right?
Yes.
What's going to cost to prep the house? Staging, improvements, any deposits you can make, and where's that money going to come from, right? So it's not simple, like, oh, cool, like we have some money, but do we have to pull it out of investments? Do we have to pull it out of retirement accounts prematurely? Is that going to be tax and
Can we
penalties?
roll it into escrow?
Roll it out, exactly, yeah. Apparently there are different tools and solutions you can use where you can help fund that without having to extract from investments.
Yeah.
And then great, you sell. What's it going to cost to move, right? Where are you going to move to? Down payments on the new place. Maybe you're renting, closing costs, things like that. So there's definitely a lot of money transferring. You got to make sure it goes in the right piles and that it's being organized properly. Are you buying? Are you renting? Questions again, back to lifestyle. What's that going to look like?
So you have these discussions with people that you really are trying to
Absolutely
go deep and figure out that why, and just not have it be a rush decision.
Yeah, just really thinking through all those steps. If you go to senior living, it's much more expensive, right? For example, Rossmore and Walnut Creek. Everyone wants to go there, and it's a great place to go, but everything's a little more expensive, and HOA costs are more. So you got to just budget those things in and really think through what those steps look like. And then lastly, great, once you kind of settle that, what do you do with the leftover proceeds? Do we reinvest it? How do we reinvest those dollars? We use that money to put more on a down payment on the house, or maybe it's smarter to actually have a small mortgage. Maybe we use leverage to our advantage and we're able to use that money and put it in some sort of retirement fund that helps us, build sustainable wealth over time. So we really want to think through a lot of the steps, and those are just a few questions I ask clients when I'm going through this.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, no, it's a lot to think of. Are there any pitfalls that you've seen or stumbling blocks?
Yeah, so I think it's people tend to make arbitrary decisions. It's very off the cuff decisions, and it's like, let's be methodical about this. Let's be thoughtful. Let's be mindful about what are the steps we're taking. Because again, if you make the wrong step, oops, that could really set you a few steps behind. And when you're in retirement, especially, you don't have room for error. You got to really make smart, decisive decisions.
And probably some of those being tax implications.
Yes. So, if you sell, too high or too low or whatnot, that could be a tax issue. Around here, obviously, you're probably selling at a profit, hopefully. Yeah. And making sure that you don't take all the money that might have to go to taxes that you didn't know about and putting it down payment of a house. And they're like, oops, I actually need that money back. And that's tricky. So you want to make sure you're thinking through, great, you sell the house at a profit, what are those tax implications? Also thinking about, like I was saying earlier, if you're taking money out of an account, not every account's made equal. If you take money out of a retirement account, that might trigger taxes, that might trigger even penalties depending on your age. So we really want to think that you need money, where does that money come from? What's the most efficient and smart way to take that money? Not fully understanding your budget. So again, I see clients when they move and they're spending way more on their new house than they probably should be. And they don't really meet their income needs, but they're being very hopeful and optimistic, which is great. I want them to enjoy their life.
Yes.
But let's also make sure that we're not overspending ourselves in a pitfall down the road. And then the last things I see clients where they don't sell their house, they go buy a new house and they want to rent out the old house, which I think is a great idea. Most people don't understand the difficulty of being a landlord and what that really means.
Any landlords here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Okay. How's that going?
Right now, great, I have some wonderful tenants
No,
now,
good.
the
You're lucky.
luckiest tenant, however, not so wonderful.
Right,
So, yeah, that is a wild card.
It happens, and so you gotta, for me, I'll try to talk my clients out of being it. If I can talk them out in 15 minutes, it will not last being a landlord. But if I walk them through the pros and cons and really, hey, you might have to deal with city laws and compliance and.
Hyper dogs.
Yeah,
That's right, of course, yeah.
they're okay with that. And they understand really what those risks are and are willing to absorb it both emotionally and financially. Then, okay, we can start to go down that path. But I want to just walk them through those things. So they tend to be the pitfalls.
Yeah, it's not for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, for sure, yeah, okay, so really.
Yeah.
We slow down, I know it's exciting to think about selling and moving and what that dream house may be, but like, let's just slow the process down.
Exactly.
Let's be intentional,
It's methodical.
have a game plan.
Yep, absolutely.
I like it.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's assume that we've done the game plan.
Yep.
We've been methodical.
Yep.
When do you bring like them to be like, okay, let's move on, or what would the next step be then?
Yeah, great question. So I really think about it in terms of 3 scenarios. What's your worst case scenario? What's your best case scenario? And what's kind of the average case? As long as you're okay with any one of those, then I say, great, let's talk with a realtor, let's talk with a lender. If you're not okay with them, then we got to readjust what the scenarios look like and make sure we're within kind of a reasonable profile of risk. So, yeah, so then we talk to the lender.
Talk to the
Perfect transition.
lender. Yeah,
That would be me.
yeah. So Jenna, a lot of, right, sellers are going to be becoming buyers,
Correct, yeah.
right? Let me just ask you this. Here's the question, and then another question, right? Is now a good time to be selling or buying?
I think
Yeah.
yes to both.
Okay.
Right? So the reason why I say yes, it's a buyer's market, of course, because I'm on that side of the transaction. And right now, sellers are, giving concessions towards closing costs. They're coming up with creative ways to make their property stand out, which is really smart in this market. It's not that sellers are missing out because they didn't sell 9 months ago, 12 months ago, because that was not a normalized market, right? That was kind of an anomaly because of what was going on globally over in Ukraine and Russia with the war and the pandemic. So what we saw was just this huge imbalance because it was just such a unicorn of a market. Now we have a more normalized market, right? So as a buyer, you're able to maybe keep your contingencies in place in some markets,
Yeah.
right? Negotiate with the seller so that it's mutually beneficial on price. Maybe get some concessions towards your closing costs. So there's a lot more room to just kind of like, get a mutually beneficial deal in a more normalized market as opposed to before when it was just people throwing money, 40, 50, 60 offers against some properties. And that's just very atypical.
That was the unicorn, as you say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's important as a seller to understand the buyer's psychology.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit now about what you're seeing or any shifts that you've seen actually from earlier this year to present day?
Yeah, so I very similarly, right? I sit down with my clients, every single buyer I have, and I have a very lengthy conversation. I try to do it at least via Zoom so that we can be, face to face. And it takes roughly, 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the client's questions. And one of the biggest shifts is that 9 months ago, you had these buyers who they saw rates in the 2s and the 3s, and they thought, okay, great, I'm going to go in, I'm going to offer hundreds of thousands over asking, sometimes millions over asking, right? Because the rate had a 2 and a 3 in front of it, and that felt affordable. That psychology, for whatever reason, like they just felt more comfortable paying more for a property. Now rates are in the 6s and the 7s, and they can get the house because prices have come down, they've normalized a bit. But they're not willing to pay the 6 or 7% interest rate for a house that's more affordable in price. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting psychology right now. And the way that I'm explaining that to people, and of course, you never want to say, buy the house, get the great deal because you can refinance later. Because there's a lot that goes into the refinance process. Like, what is the value going to be? What's your loan to value ratio going to be? Will you qualify at that point in time? Has anything changed with your income or employment or, whatnot? But I would say most buyers who buy in this type of a market are going to get, again, a more normalized type of a contract. And then they can, they can attempt to refinance later and save themselves, hundreds or even thousands of dollars on their mortgage payment. So
Yeah, because that house is fixed, it's not changing neighborhoods.
the price of the house is going to be the price of the house, and that's what you have forever, right? That's set. You
You can only
can't,
buy it
you
once.
only buy it once. But mortgages, statistically, people do not keep their mortgages for more than, in a typical market, 5 to 7 years. And more recently, when rates were lower, it was more like 1 to 2 to 3 years, So, yeah, the financing piece is just not permanent. Rarely permanent. Yeah, people just don't keep their loans for 30 years.
So tell me a little bit more about like, how are you advising buyers as far as accepting that they can make the payments and don't necessarily worry about that 6 or that 7 or whatever the number is?
Right.
What's that?
Well, it really
discussion?
doesn't matter what the interest rate is, right? Because I have clients who bought their first home when rates were 13%, 17%, 18%, but they could afford the monthly payment, right? If you have the price of the home and you can afford the monthly payment, whether the rate's a 6% or a 7%, whatever it is, and it doesn't negatively impact your lifestyle. Because I've been in the business 18 years, right? So I've seen the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. If it's not negatively impacting financially, it's conservative and you can conservatively afford it and you can maintain your lifestyle and invest and put money away for retirement and travel if that's what you want to do and do all the
Meet your
things you
life
love.
goals. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about the affordability component. Yeah, it really doesn't matter what the rate is as long as you can comfortably afford it.
Okay, interesting. And then when you started, you talked a little bit about creative solutions that you're seeing now. Talk to us a little bit about some maybe the deals you're seeing come through
Sure.
now and how there are concessions as you
Right.
said.
Yeah, 100% of the contracts I have going for my clients right now, they have seller concessions. And what they're using those concessions for is closing cover cost, closing costs, covering closing costs. I can get that out. They are in some products, like a jumbo product, you can use the points to buy rate down, right? And that's a permanent buy down. And then there's also something called a temporary buy down, and we have 3 different versions of it. The most common that you'll hear is called the 2-1 buy down. And essentially what that is you have your note rate, and let's just for even numbers, let's say it's 7%. In year 1, your rate is 5%, 2% lower. In year 2, it's 1% lower at 6%. And then years 3 through 30, it goes back up to the note rate. Well, most of us believe, right, when inflation gets under control, whatever that may be, we will start to see rates come down. In fact, yesterday we had quite the rally in the market, over 200 basis points in mortgage-backed securities. And that brought rates down about 0.5% in one day to 5/8. And now again, that's based on an announcement that inflation rates had come down. So it's knee-jerk. We see those knee-jerk reactions. And so next week we might see, us lose some of those gains. But overall, the optimism is, okay, inflation is starting to come down. Prices are starting to come down in certain sectors. And so we'll see interest rates come down at that point. So most of us believe in the next 1 to 2 years, everybody who purchased in this market this year will ultimately, if they qualify, will be able to refinance their loan into a lower interest rate. So yeah, definitely some strategy there for short-term and long-term planning. Right?
Jenny, I'm curious, tell me from the realtor's point of view, what are you seeing happening in the market?
Well, what we're seeing now is the buyers who are coming in definitely want to open up a house and be ready to move in. They're not really looking for fixers. There are some clients who are looking for that, can see the value in a house that's priced a little bit lower because it needs a little bit of work. But for the most part, the buyers who are coming into the houses that we have listed, they want things that look nice and are ready to move in. They don't want to come in and do a lot of work. So I work with all of the members on our team, and kind of what I really like to do is help I'm sort of like a liaison with the sellers to kind of help them prep their home. So my very first call is to this guy, Cody. I usually text him or I call him, I'm like, hey, we have a new listing, you know, and I get the inspections lined up. And what we like to do is make sure that your process is as seamless as possible to get to market. So some things that we've been seeing that the buyers are really looking for, and they're kind of easy solutions for any home, is the first thing we recommend is let's get a fresh coat of paint. If there's some carpet that needs to be replaced, it's not that expensive to get some carpet. We've done some like light remodels here and there, but what we really do is we try to work with the seller to find solutions to make sure that their house, when we open up the door to sell it, that it looks as the best that we can get it for the sellers. So we're 100%.
Is that buyer? Like, what are we seeing?
They're like 30 to 40-year-olds, I feel right now. A lot of them work here. They're coming up from the peninsula or from the city, and they're looking for room. Like they're looking for a little bit more room than what they're getting there, quite honestly. And with the pandemic, I think we all realized that even if we have a giant house, our giant house feels really small, and your husband and your dogs and your kids are in it, and you're all trying to get your work done. So people are looking for space to work and space to, you know, to be able to move around in the house, quite honestly.
And as far as taste, are there any trends that we are hearing and seeing that buyers want in regards to
Taste.
taste?
Oh. You know, a couple of years ago when you walked into a house, everything was really gray, and now it's definitely getting back to like the warmer tones. But yeah, no, it's people just want clean. They want it to look clean when they walk in. A lot of white walls. You're seeing a lot of white walls now.
So light and bright.
Light and bright. Yeah, adding light, taking your window coverings off, like that kind of stuff, so that when you walk into a house, you can see the natural light.
So I know that one of our other initial calls after we get our inspections is obviously to work with our stager.
Yeah, so we have a stager that we work with. We have a couple, but there's one that's near and dear to most of our hearts. And what she really does, and we bring her in at our cost, we do the staging to our cost. And what she really does is she walks through your home and she looks at it through the eyes of the potential buyer, but also of the camera, because 100% of buyers who are coming through your house have looked at it online first. So we want to make sure that we have it set so that when the photographer comes through, they're able to capture it in its best light and its best time of day. And that's what we put online for the potential buyers to see. But what she does is she comes through, she's very spatially oriented. So she wants to make sure that there's room, that if you have a room that has, you know, a lot of furniture, she'll take the furniture that she can use, like this is a beautiful couch, or this is a beautiful chair, and she'll decorate around it. But her main recommendations usually is get as much things out of your home as possible. We'll fill in with some things that, you know, some accents, some accents or photography or whatever that's current. But she really just comes through and makes it look at the best it can possibly be for the eyes of the camera and for the eyes of potential buyers.
And I know we're talking about one stager in particular, who's a bit unique to our team and our services.
Yeah.
Not all stagers will allow you to keep your stuff. A lot of them, they want a vacant house, and you may not be ready for that as a seller to be like, well, where does my stuff go?
Right.
We are able to work with this individual stylist, if you will, and she can use the best parts of your home and kind of, so you still kind of maintain a lot of some of your comfort and your style of your home, and she just knows how to enhance it. And the fitting that we do generally does go into the garage.
Yeah. And also, it's really important if you're staying in your home that she knows that, and we know that you have to live there. So if, you know, the day of photography, we'll ask you to take your coffee machine down and that kind of stuff, but the rest of the time you can live in it. You know, she puts beautiful bedding on your bed, but at night you just take it off and you sleep in your own bedding and, you know, that kind of thing. But she's really great at, we just had a client who had this beautiful, like kind of wingback chair. It was a little bit bluer than this blue. It was almost like the color of your suit. It was beautiful. And she used that as sort of an anchor of inspiration, and every house in the room had a touch of that blue. And it's just something that you wouldn't normally see, but when our seller walked in, she was almost brought to tears. She was just like, this is so amazing that the whole house is based pretty much on my grandmother's chair. And it's really important to us too, that when you are selling your home, that it's a comfortable process for you. As comfortable as it can be, because it's really uncomfortable for people to come in and Cody to come and painters to come and all of these people to come, and you feel like they're telling you all the things that are wrong with your home, right? Like, well, we're gonna change this and we're gonna change that, but we're really just trying to enhance it so that those buyers who come in will be able to see themselves kind of living that same great life that you lived in your house.
That's awesome, I love that. Okay. Can you talk to me or tell me a little bit about like what if a homeowner was going to be maybe interviewing realtors?
Oh, yeah.
What would be some of the important questions or points or expenses or things they should be aware of or know of that differentiate different groups of realtors?
Yes. There's a lot of hidden things that you're not really gonna think about. Photography, staging, like any kind of home improvements, generally like on our team, any home improvements that you do is gonna be out of your pocketbook, but the photography and staging we feel as part of our service, so we include that in our service. I'm trying moving, that sort of thing, and not just moving, but packing. A lot of times you don't really think, you've lived in your house for 20 years, there's a lot of things, how am I gonna pack it all? And we have people, you just wanna make sure that whoever you talk to have people on their team that they can rely on, that are qualified and professional, that can come in and really take care of your things. Because I mean, I know I have a lot of things that I wouldn't trust just to anybody to pack. And like those are just all things that you really need to think of, like your lawn service, landscaping, all those kinds of things are just sort of, you know, you pay $100 a month for your landscaper, but sometimes when you need a little bit more, you know, there's just some additional costs that come in sort of at the end.
So really one of the things is making sure that whoever you select has a good network of resources.
Vendors, yeah.
And vendors.
Vendors are
that they're
really
tapped
important,
in,
yeah.
And that they're personally there to manage it and not just like, here's a list, here you go,
Yeah.
good luck with that.
Like when Cody comes in,
I'm there too.
so actually not he who comes, but when Steven comes, and we have people that you just want to make sure that they have a good team that they're comfortable with, that it's not, we don't ever send anybody into a house that's a stranger. So when we do have stagers come through or inspectors or painters, they're people that we work with regularly. And most of the time with the vendors, there are people that I have work on my house regularly, like our painter, the guy who did our floors just recently, he does a lot of things for our clients too. So just make sure that they have people in their pocket that they trust, that you trust.
Moving on to trusted partners. Cody, talk to me a little bit about inspection and what sellers might expect to take on, or why are even inspection reports necessary?
Yeah, for sure. So I think kind of like you guys are talking about the market changing, it was typically on the buyers for a while. And then now we're starting to see a lot more pre-sale inspections, which I think is great because honestly, it gives you a ton of information up front. You're not all of a sudden getting a report from, you know, a buyer and some company you've never heard of, and maybe your agent has worked with, where they're pointing out a lot of things wrong with your house that you may have lived in for a number of years. And I know some folks might even take it personally. You know, you think you've kind of stayed on top of stuff maintenance wise, but over time things kind of break down and, you know, stuff has to get fixed. So I think having the inspections done on the front end kind of goes back to the financial planning a little bit as well, because you may have more repairs and issues than you may have been aware of. You know, so there's several different types of inspections. We perform the termite or the pest inspection. So we're looking kind of at everything structurally, not just for bugs and all that stuff, but also damaged wood members, leaks. Maybe the showers had a leak going on for a number of years. You haven't been under the house to see it, and might have some costly repairs there. The home inspection reports, they're going to look really at kind of everything. So all your appliances, your HVAC, the doors, the windows, making sure everything opens, closes, and functions properly. The roof inspection is kind of another real common one, but they've got inspections for pretty much anything. You know, it could be a chimney, a pool, foundation. And I would recommend it because I had a situation a few years back when I bought a house that actually had a well. I was on septic, which I'd never lived with either one of those before for a personal house. And the seller assured me, the septic's in great shape and don't worry about it. And I was like, I'm in the inspection business. I'm gonna get an inspection done. And so I did. And the septic was completely shot and it cost him like $40,000. So he had to go through all the permits with the city and take care of that. Which, it's still a tough pill to swallow if he'd have known that before I kind of popped in, but there's definitely some things that can add up and kind of eat at your bottom line. If you think you're gonna have so much money to take to the next place and kind of live your life comfortably. And then it helps you with your realtor to kind of game plan and see, which of these are important. Kind of going back to maybe that leaking shower. Should we replace it or should we just credit the buyer because maybe they have completely different tastes? So instead of spending a lot of money, just kind of say, hey, this is what we're prepared to do. And I think a lot of buyers are happy with that because they're going to get something that they like to live with.
Yeah, I agree with you. It goes into that current buyer psychology right now is they like a ready to go home, right? Move in ready, and any hurdle that you give to them potentially of just one more thing for them to fix, one more thing for them to do. If you can take that on and pre-plan and pre-budget that in, that makes your house stand out and be more attractive.
Not only that, but
Yeah.
also, just knowing it ahead of time, it's just part of your disclosure. Like if you know it and you disclose it, it's
Yeah.
something that might become like a negotiable item. If you know that there's a leak in the shower and someone's gonna have to take the shower out, and the buyer who's coming in knows that, then it turns into kind of like a negotiation a lot of times too, especially with the pest inspection, because with the pest inspection, there's a dollar amount that's attached to the things in the home inspection. There is no dollar amount that they put with, your electrical panel needs fixing or whatever, but in everything that they give us, there's a dollar amount attached to it. So we know what it is. So if you present that to the buyer, then they'll be able to say, well, we really love this house, but could you take care of items 1, 7, and 10 or whatever? So it ends up being part of the negotiation between the buyer and the seller.
And also liability, the liability
Yes.
factor, right? So if you're a seller and you're selling your home and you don't get an inspection and there are these hidden skeletons that you're unaware of, or maybe you
Hopefully
not
not
aware- Not the literal. Yeah, that would be a little weird. But then, and you know about them and you disclose them properly, then, down the line, if the buyer finds something out after they've purchased the home, then they can come back to you and say, well, why didn't you disclose this?
Nobody wants to come back wrong.
How did they know, right, exactly, that they didn't know about it? So, yeah, it protects you as a seller to just make sure that you can disclose everything you're aware of and.
Protect your time, which is the most valuable thing.
Protected, yes.
So,
Yeah, I think also, the mindset of a buyer, they're probably looking at several different homes and maybe they really do like your home. And then that report comes back with $10,000, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Right.
They're gonna want every single item done and they've already invested, a few $100 or maybe close to 1,000, depending on how many inspections that they ordered. And so, it's kind of nice for them, I think, coming in too, knowing what you're willing to negotiate on and what you're willing to take care of, as opposed to walking in, all right, I put $1,000 into 3 or 4 different inspections coming through. And then having this expectation, and then they kind of have to walk away, depending on what the situation is. So, I think it's helpful just to have more people even be interested in the home, because a lot of folks, maybe they like it, but they don't necessarily love it, and they don't want to invest the money either at that point.
More serious interest.
Yeah.
So 2 more things I'd love for you to review. One, we talked about these items, and I know they go into certain sections, if you can describe what those things are, and then also in general, maybe just a overview of what reports cost, so we can budget that in potentially ballpark.
For sure. So the inspections, depending on how many you get, for the termite inspection, if your house is, we'll just say under 2,000 square feet, the termite inspection is $300. A home inspection is usually going to be about $500, and then roof inspection is about $125. So I mean, you're looking at $925 right there, I guess. So it is kind of an upfront cost, but again, puts you in the driver's seat with which decisions you want to make. Kind of like they said, the home report's gonna kind of focus on everything and just kind of point out issues. They're not actually looking to correct anything. They're just gonna refer to other trades. Where the termite inspection, we're also general contractors, so we do kitchen and bathroom remodels, as well as all the repairs and treatments and fumigations for my reports. But we have to break them down into 3 different sections. So there's section 1, which is either active termites or active fungus damage. So those are things that typically you want to take care of and address. Section 2 items are more general homeowner notes, things to keep an eye on and stuff that over time could turn into section 1. So that might be like a leak that's fairly recent, hasn't actually caused any damage yet. Different things of that nature, whether it's like degrading and, you know, your gutters, stuff like that. You want water draining away from your home. Water is kind of your biggest enemy as a homeowner. And then section 3 or further inspection item, those are things that we couldn't quite fully see. So maybe if you put all your stuff in the garage, you can't see anything in there, we'll put a note, hey, we weren't able to access everything. Or it could be, you know, there's a water stain on your sheetrock. We can't tell fully, but kind of reason to believe there could be a leak or some issues. So we'll recommend sometimes to open up different areas of the home so that we can get eyes on it if there's any kind of outside sources. Yeah.
So section 1, section 2?
Yeah, section 1, active issue there, whether it's some damaged wood that needs to be replaced or termites. There's a few other insects and stuff that eat wood. And then section 2, just kind of notes and general homeowner maintenance things, stuff to keep an eye on.
Yeah, but an attractive thing for anyone who is selling right now to say, we've got clean section 1, like that is a desirable, something desirable by our buyers again. They like moving it. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, let's move to that. So Donna, I know the majority of title and escrow is generally at the end, but you come in early with us too as well. Talk to us about how you help us get started.
Yeah, we certainly can get started early if we do what's called a pre-sale escrow, and that's where the listing agent would open the escrow with us. We can pull the preliminary report, see what liens and encumbrances are on the property. Is there anything unusual or unexpected? If the sale is due to maybe a death in the family or something, if that's not in a trust, it's going to need to be a probate situation. Those can take 90 days, 30 months, up to 6 months. So it really depends on lots of variables with something like that. The thing that's interesting about the pre-sale escrow, so we have 9 Bay Area counties, and all but Santa Clara County is what we consider a buyer paid county. All that really means is that it's customary for the buyers in those counties to pay for the title and escrow fees. Santa Clara County is the opposite, and it's seller paid, and that it just makes so much sense to me based on especially how this team works with upfront inspections and all the things. It's just another layer of being prepared before the house is fully ready. It's just another step in getting it ready. So what we find because of that is the majority of listing agents will call and open a pre-sale escrow because they want the advantage of what that information is going to entail or
What
show them.
does it show? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting because when a buyer comes along, that becomes a negotiable item. It doesn't mean that the escrow will stay with the company they opened it with because, as I said, it's an area that's customary for the buyers to pay the title and escrow fees. And because they do that, they get the choice of where to have the escrow. So it makes it a little wonky in some cases. Our really strong agents are usually able to keep that escrow with us, and then it doesn't delay the process. If there is a probate situation involved, most agents representing buyers are not going to come in and try to move that escrow because they know they're starting from scratch again. Like anything that's been done up until that time is usable with us only. They can't go, oh, let's move over here to XYZ title company and work with them now because you're starting all over. Most agents aren't going to do that. But some buyers agents will come along and they're like, I've worked with this title company for 25 years and I really want it over there. Then it's up to them to negotiate that. So we don't have any part in who chooses us. We're just there for service. So we're really a neutral third party. We're there to follow the instructions of the buyers and sellers agents and any lenders that might be involved on the transaction. When we prepare the preliminary report, that's basically our offer saying we will provide title insurance on this property. And then we're going to show you any liens that are on the property. You'll learn about any easements, which is also a really nice thing for especially areas over here that aren't all cookie cutter type properties. Maybe there's been some subdividing done. That prelim really breaks down any easements, and we can provide color coded maps that show the buyers where all those easements on the property might be.
Shared
So-
right of ways, utilities.
Yep.
Yeah.
All of that. So it's really, I'd love to advocate and get on some team that pushes our county locally to be seller paid, just for that reason, but that's a whole nother panel. So, but it really does help Stephanie and her team to know how to assist you if we can open that pre-sale and get the prelim prepared.
So we're doing that early. We're getting ahead again of the game. We're strategizing. We're looking for potential encumbrances. It is free.
So it is free. Nobody pays for a prelim, but we also can't just provide a prelim just because. So it would have to be on an open, you have to open the escrow, and then the next process is to start researching the preliminary report. It does cost us money, but we don't forward it on to you. We just, if the transaction closes with us, then it's great because it's just part of our, it's a fee that doesn't exist for clients.
Good to know. Okay, since we were talking a little bit about, you said it is customary in this market for the buyer to take on the cost of title and escrow. Can you talk about what are other customary fees on each side of the ledger?
Sure. So a seller would pay a document transfer fee in this county in Contra Costa, and that's generally about 55 cents per $500. So around $2,000 on about a $2 million house. Well, 2,200, I guess, we're getting technical. So sellers aren't responsible for very many fees unless you are, doing your inspections and all that. But as far as title and escrow is concerned, really you're just paying a document transfer fee, and that goes to the county, not to us.
And customary for city taxes, things like that.
Yeah, so that varies. Say Contra Costa, for instance, only Richmond has a city transfer tax. I know Alameda County is a little different, and I work in Contra Costa County, so I don't specialize in the exact
So
amounts over
Here in
here.
Oakland, yes, we do have
But you have
city
different
tax.
ones.
Yeah, and it is customary for the city tax to be split equally between the buyer and seller. However, it's always a negotiation point. It's part of the deal. And if you as a seller are especially motivated and want to attract a buyer, that could be a concession that you make, one of the concessions. So there's custom, and then it's how aggressive and how attractive we want to make our property to a buyer. Donna, let's talk a little bit about trust. I know you had some great information to share about trust.
Sure. So if your property is held in a trust and you're preparing to sell it, if you don't already have a bank account in the name of your trust, by the time that the escrow closes, you'll need that, because we're only allowed to disperse funds to the owner of the house. And if the owner of the house is the trust, then the trust must have a bank account. So that's something that gets missed a lot. Most people don't write checks in the name of their trust, so they don't really have a bank account. And often a trust is set up after you purchased a property. So until you go to sell that, you might not have ever considered having a bank account in that name. So obviously it's not a super challenging thing, and you can get it done in a day, but it's just something I like to mention up front, especially if your agents understand and realize your account is, or your home is held in a trust. It's a nice thing for them
Let's
to
get
just
you paid.
be able
Let's
to
put the
say,
money in the
"Hey,
trust.
I know that sometimes because we're not, we're just getting on the market. We don't have a buyer yet, but go ahead and get the account, because that check would just be held. But you want your proceeds as quickly as you can get them, I'm sure. So that's just one of the things we run into with the trust. If you do not have a trust and there's been a death in the family, or a death to someone that is held on title, then again, that kind of goes back to that probate situation. And you don't really want that. So I'm not a trust planner, but it's a great idea to have one.
Doesn't any more about trust you wanted to jump in on?
Yeah, so, with trust, oftentimes we don't have them.
Yeah.
So first off, get one. I think
Yeah.
that's typical, especially
Yeah.
in California, the Bay Area. In short, if you have assets, and I'm very much generalizing, with assets over $250,000, and you pass away, all that's probatable. And it's based off of, the value of the house, not your equity. So basically, everyone owns a house here, it's gonna end up going to probate if you don't have the trust. So good advice, get that for other reasons too, healthcare directors, power of attorney. But people often then forget too that, not only is your asset deeded in the trust, it's also listed in the trust. If you sell that asset, you want to make sure you update your trust to reflect both sides of that. Obviously, the house is sold, so no more deed, but then if it's still listed, that could be a problem. Actually, really, it's kind of create more confusion for those who are administering the trust when you pass away, because you died, you can't speak for yourself more. So people are trying to interpret what's in that document.
Probably it's expensive.
It
It's
is,
expensive for your,
yeah.
for whoever.
It's not cheap. I mean,
Property.
roughly speaking, like 5%, whatever the they will say
Right,
is.
Very
So
expensive.
$1 million, that's 50 grand.
Right.
there. Why give that away to the court if you don't have to?
Right.
So it should go to the beneficiaries.
Yeah.
But yeah, in regards to trust.
Okay, cool. I think a couple of last points we wanted to talk about maybe were assessment and maybe Prop 19. Yeah.
Yeah,
Should I jump in?
go for it.
All right. Prop 19, I think people have likely heard of that. It took effect in April of 2021. And what it does is it applies to people, homeowners, sellers over the age of 55 or those who have severe disability and or those who are victims of natural disasters or wildfires and things like that. And what it allows you to do is transfer your primary residence, so not your rental property, right? Not your second home, but your primary residence, your tax base into a new home, okay? You can buy down, you can buy equal, you can buy up, and whatever your existing taxable base was, that comes with you into your new purchase. That needs to be done within 2 years of the sale of your primary residence. And it applies anywhere in the state. You can move anywhere in the state of California. Before there were limits, I think it had to be done within certain counties. Right now, it's the entire state of California, and you can do this up to 3 times in your lifetime above 55 and or wildfire. Actually, there's no limits on wildfires. And severe disabilities 3 times. So that's a little interesting information about Prop 19. Any questions about Prop 19 before? Okay. I think last we wanted to touch on assessments a little bit. We had some interesting information to share about maybe some of you are thinking of doing a little upgrades to your home. We found a little nugget that we wanted to share.
Do you want to share?
No, you
Okay,
go.
okay. So we had an assessor come out at our last meeting.
Yeah.
And he said that if you just do like a straight up upgrade, it's possible to trigger reassessment. But if you qualify as a repair, necessary repair. So you're redoing the kitchen and there's gonna be some damage somewhere, probably a little bit of water damage somewhere. Document it, take pictures of it, because that could help prevent or mitigate an increase of property taxes. So it was a cool.
Good to know. Yeah. So anyone who's doing upgrades, document it, find some water damage, something.
Right.
Find some, not the water damage, and then you had to do the repairs, the upgrade because of that damage, right? But documented it, let's be truthful about it, it does exist, but just to know that it's even available to you is awesome. Yeah. Anyone on the panel want to share any last nuggets or more insights, or please I'd like to open it up to any questions we have here in the audience today.
Yeah, I think circling
Yeah.
back to just, buyer versus seller market,
Yeah.
right? And how we talked about it, of course, I'm on one end of the transaction, and so I'm dealing with the buyer piece more. When you're selling, right? So in this crazy market that we had where people were paying lots and lots over and it felt really good for sellers, well, those sellers have to move. And when they're buying, now they're going to be on the buying end. And so in this type of a market, being more normalized, buyers and sellers both have benefits. If you're selling your home, you're buying something else, and you're going to be the one who's going to be able to negotiate and keep your contingencies in place and maybe get some concessions. And so I think that's a really important thing. Before, sellers were kind of scared to sell because they knew they were going to be in this buyer pool. And so I think that's another perk of being a seller in this market.
Yeah.
You, on the buy side, you're gonna be in great shape.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's part of it. Yeah.
It definitely feels like more of a healthy market.
Yeah,
yeah,
We
it does.
were a year ago, or yeah, it's like a year ago, January, February, it didn't feel great. Like I represented a lot of buyers and it was just, a seller could just open up their house and say, here it is, you know what this is, come give us all your money. And it was great to, have listings on that. But again, it wasn't, because it was just a lot of buyer fatigue. And I feel like the buyers who are coming back out now are very serious, because they may have been in that market and been really burned by putting offers in repeatedly and getting pushed away. But I feel like there's still a lot of those people who didn't get in a house in January, February, April, and are now coming back. And, they're serious. There are a lot of really serious buyers out there.
And I'm actually looking, my husband and I are looking to pick up maybe a couple additional investment
Do you have a
properties right
realtor?
now. Do you have a license in real estate, actually. It used to be back in the day. I don't think you had to get a real estate license, actually. But yeah, I think, gosh, I can lost my healthy.
Healthy
Yeah,
market.
it's a healthy market, exactly. As we're looking at these properties, you look at the history of the sale. And a lot of the properties on the market right now were bought in 2021, right? Or even 2022, earlier in the year. So you think that there's also a bit of a wave of buyer's remorse, right? Where they bought and they feel like, oh gosh, we bought at the top end of the market and now they're trying to get out of it, maybe even just kind of even and not make a profit. And so in this type of a market, it's going to feel good for both parties. And I think that's a really important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the summary for today is things have changed. Which we think right now, probably in a good way. It feels a little healthier. It's not as lopsided. I think it's really important to plan, to strategize, to think ahead, to be very mindful of who you work with. You can't just, as a seller, gone are the days where you just, again, we talked about it, put a sign up in the yard and think you're gonna have people lining up. No, we need to be creative. We need to find solutions. We need to have a good team backing you to help attract and procure that buyer and do all the right things to get their attention. So I feel really good about the information shared here today. I want to thank all of my panelists and teammates and colleagues that I work with y'all regularly. So I'm grateful for everyone's contribution here today. And I think we have some questions. Yeah.
A question for Dustin. A lot of the homes in this area have appreciated substantially in the last 10 to 20 years. What are some of the best uses of those proceeds to avoid a lot of capital gains taxes?
Yeah, so, great question. Should talk about taxes. Yeah, so, so the way primary resident taxes work, and quick disclaimer, not a CPA, not a tax attorney, so speak with your CPA and tax attorney, because I don't do taxes on an annual basis for clients. Your state attorney is technically a tax attorney, so good person always lean on. Basically, if you are single, the first $250,000 in profits on your property is tax-free. If you're married, it's $500,000, that doubles. And then anything above and beyond that will be then taxed at capital gains rates. So for example, you buy your house at $1 million and it's appreciated to 1.6 million. So you made $600,000 in profits. And let's say you're married, first 500 grand, it's tax-free. Next 100,000 then is taxed at capital gains rates. Capital gains rates varies depending on how much money you make, not only with the property, but also your wages over the course of the year. And then there's federal and there's federal capital gains. There's not a California state capital gains. That just applies to the regular California tax rate. Basically, there's going to be taxes. So just in short, there's taxes.
Okay. How do we mitigate?
Good question. So one, you can always sell your house for less. Nobody wants to do that. But what you could do is you could always try to raise what's called your cost basis. So even though you bought it $1 million, over the course of years that you've been having this house, did you do improvements? Did you add on to it? Keep all those receipts, keep an email folder and just save every receipt you can. Keep a hard folder in your closet and just save every receipt, because your account will add all those things up and that will help raise your cost basis from, let's say, 100,000 to 1.1. Now you fell right within that $500,000 range, and you get to then take all that money and go buy something else. You're not gonna pay taxes.
The costs from your sale of your home
Yep.
go into
Yep.
closing costs, realtor fees,
Everything unrelated, just.
keep it.
Time you own the home, right?
Yep, exactly. So, great segue. So, people will oftentimes, oh, let me rent my house out before I leave. And so the trick there is that if you have not, in order for you to get that capital gain exemption, you have to live in the house last 2 of the last 5 years. So look at the last 5 years. Have you lived there for 2 years?
As your primary residence.
Primary residence, you get to have that capital gain exemption benefit. If it's, 3 years, you lost it. So you really want to be strategic. It goes back to why and planning. Make sure you're smart about making sure you maintain that, or you're okay saying, hey, we're turning this a rental, we're going to pay some capital gains in the future, which then you can open a whole other slew of possibilities, 1031 exchanges,
Exchange, yeah.
etc. So, but it just things to think about.
Question, because I actually don't know this.
Okay.
So if a person buys a property as a single person
Yep.
and they lived in it a few years and then they get married and the married couple moves to a new home and they turn it into an investment.
Yeah.
What are the thresholds on the 250 versus 500?
Good question. So my understanding of this, and I think with a few clients where we literally got married and then sold the house, just to capture that.
Mhm.
Now yours is a little bit trickier because you got married and then turned to investment.
Right,
And so that kind of adds another wrinkle to it.
Right.
Um,
But if it was within that 5-year period and you lived in it for 2 years.
Yeah.
As a single person.
get married for one day. and
Right.
then- I mean, literally, I had a client do that where they got married, they're married for a month, sold the house, and then they remained married, so it was like a sham marriage. But they literally did that, and
Now, does the
Why
new
is it-
spouse have to be on title in order for that to count as?
that's a really question I don't have an answer. I
Yeah.
would imagine that, yes, if I don't.
Yeah.
But to be fair as well, that marriage by nature,
Community
is
property
community
estate,
property,
right.
so,
Right.
yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
because anything earned after, like, if it's.
I think if you're being smart, you put your new spouse on title. That's, if you really want to document every piece of it, not just show, hey, we just did this one piece, and the IRS comes knocking, and then they're saying, hey, where's the rest of this equation?
Right,
So you really want to have all the pieces lined up, but could you make an argument?
and back to the
Yeah.
trust, if it's, the property's in a trust, obviously, actually.
Exactly.
question it. Yeah.
Well, that and well, then, did you add your new spouse to trust? Would you guys design a new trust, or how is that trust managed? So there's a few pieces I think you want to always line up. But you can make the argument that, hey, we're married, this is, it technically would fall within the scope of that, so, yeah.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a situation, my house is gonna be a fixer upper. And I have a lot of equity in it, I've been there about 35 years. So the question is, should I get it fixed, upgraded, and put about 100,000 in? Will I make that back if I sell it, even if it's 50,000 more than I put in with the 100,000? You know what I'm saying, the ratio? Or is it just sell it as is?
Depends on the buyer,
It
right?
depends on,
We do an evaluation.
yeah, we just had a very similar situation where there was a lot that needed to happen to a house. The woman's mother had just passed away and she really wanted to do things quickly. So what we did was we didn't do all of the things, but we did some of the things. Like we made sure we got a lot of stuff out, we painted, we replaced some of the flooring, but not all of it. Like, it just kind of depends. Partial, yeah. And there's some things that aren't gonna have, like in this market, aren't gonna have a return on investment. Like, you don't wanna, if you know that somebody's gonna come in and it's a fixer and they're gonna tear out your kitchen, then don't touch your kitchen. But if your kitchen's like okay for a little while, or your bathrooms are okay, it's an evaluation, really.
And the other thing is on disclosure. What if you have a problem neighbor? Like,
You disclose it.
You have to disclose that.
Yeah.
You disclose it.
One thing I want to add to what you were saying about the dollar for dollar return. Think about it also, for example, maybe you don't get a true dollar for dollar return, maybe your house is now more marketable. It's more attractive to a buyer. It might sell much easier than if you didn't do those improvements. So it's not always a quantitative rate of return. It might be,
It could lower your cost
Just-
basis as well.
it could, or
Yes.
raise it.
Raise it, excuse me,
Yeah.
raise it, yes.
But just,
Yeah.
it might just be easier on your life. especially if you're trying to get out of here, you're like, hey, I gotta go and I have other plans, to save yourself that time and headache.
There's a lot of
Spend more money.
too.
A bit of devil's advocate on
A lot of
that.
people.
You can market it too as an investment, probably come in, but then you're gonna be taking away some of that. Some of the list price, you probably, you'd have to expect to sell it for lower if you're not.
Well, you have the companies that, buy as is.
Yeah.
will come right in and, but someone, I think a realtor said to me, you're gonna get much less on an investment company than if you went.
They're not,
Yeah.
they're not buying it for their forever home. They're trying to turn a profit and say.
One thing too is, you might have some damage on the outside that you can see, but then you have a contractor come in and they start opening stuff up and they find more issues and then that keeps up in the price too. So I
But
mean,
it's a,
there's a lot of.
there's a lot of things
situations,
that go
yeah.
into it.
Also, sometimes when you update the house, if you don't appeal to the masses or it's your taste, somebody could walk in and say, well, gosh, this kitchen was just redone or these bathrooms were just redone. I don't like them. I'm gonna end up having to rip them out anyways, and you just, spend money on
Well,
it. So.
I'm putting in a new roof this week, they're coming, it has to get done.
Oh, roof is always,
It has to.
Yeah.
So,
Not this smart.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, always.
You gotta have them come out and take a look.
So yeah, so it's about the team of experts that you hire to give that opinion and show you actual comps on the market. We can show you an idea of what is recently sold that has not been fixed, right? And what those values are, and some that are maybe locally in your neighborhood that are freshened and what those values are. So we do need to go look at the available homes on the market to help you solve that equation.
Do you recommend using your equity to fix up a house or not?
Again, like Dustin, like all funds are not created equal, like there's a scenario of ways to.
It's such a, it's like saying like, hey, doctor, without really looking at me, can you prescribe a medication? It's really hard to answer that question. So, it kind of depends on what other monies do you have, what do you need the monies for? Where are those monies set up? So are they retirement accounts, are they not? So it's a hard question to
And we
answer,
have
but-
renovation companies, partners
we
that
have
can roll
partners.
into escrow. So maybe we don't need to actually have you upfront those costs. There are other ways, but there are costs with those, so.
You can also do like short-term personal loans. We offer short-term personal loans or a home equity line of credit, temporary. home equity line of
Let's put it this
credit.
way, the fact that you have equity is a good place to start.
Right.
And so that gives you options. That's the number one issue, is that if you don't have options, you can't make any choices. So you have equity, that means we can figure something out. That's a good.
More
Thank
questions?
I have a question for the inspector.
Oh,
We've owned our house for 32 years and we purchased our house from a seller. It wasn't listed, it was for sale by owner. And he was a civil engineer for the city of Oakland. I insisted on getting a home inspection and I hired one. But when I got there, he got there before I did. We were living in the peninsula and I had to leave work to meet up with him. And the inspector said, do you know who this guy is? He's, Mr. Big. And so I felt like I wasn't, like this guy was afraid to rock the boat with him because of his position in the city political scheme. And I wasn't really sure whether I got a valid inspection then. My next question is that if say we hired you and you said that our house needs $10,000 on your report worth of work, and then a buyer comes by and says, well, yeah, but you're in the pocket of the seller. I want my own inspector. He'll look at it maybe a little differently, and they come out with a vastly different inspection. How do you equalize that? So one person is saying, well, I need $100,000 worth of repairs, and you say, no, we need $10,000. How does that average out?
Well, so for home inspectors, honestly, there's not really a governing body for them. Some home inspectors are licensed through, it's called ASHI. I'm not sure what it stands for exactly, but for termite inspection companies, we're governed through the Structural Pest Control Board. So every single report that we issue, we actually have to pay $4 for the state, and we submit them all to the state each week. So we get reviewed, I mean, we're on the Department of Consumers Affairs, and you can, go in there and report us if we, did something incorrectly. For us, we've been doing it, as brothers for about 5.5 years. My brother-in-law, partner in the business, he's been doing this for like 17 or 18 years at this point. We know we're only as good as our word, and we've kind of been in each of those situations where either we were the people that came in and missed some stuff, or we were the people that came in and came behind the other company and pointed out some things. At that point, for us, it's just about our integrity as a company. If we miss some things that were blatantly obvious, we kind of have to forget. Just because, if you don't, people are going to talk, and before you know it, you're kind of out of business. So we had one recently where there was 4 different inspection reports, and they were all very different, ranging anywhere from about 10,000 up to like 90,000. And we were kind of in the middle, and we think one of the companies was kind of overpriced, taking advantage of stuff. One company did miss some things, and kind of both parties came together and they settled on our report basically to do the work. So we were able to kind of do everything. And then at that point, if you really have questions, you can always have that other company come back out and re-inspect and kind of make sure that they did remove all the damage and they did do everything that they're supposed to have done. Which we do that as well whenever somebody hires their own, private contractor to do repairs, because you don't have to do the repairs with us. It's just our bid. Take care of it, and then if you hire someone else to take care of it, then kind of like an insurance policy, essentially we'll come back and check it out, because we, unfortunately, there's a lot of standards of contractors that we've seen. So something I didn't get to say earlier, if you're either painting your house or doing a remodel, it's probably a good idea to do a termite inspection.
First,
Because we've seen people spend 20,000 on a new bathroom that the contractor put in, and it looks beautiful, but they didn't fix the damage frame. And we're gonna come in and we're gonna say, hey, it's damaged, and kind of have to pull it out again. But if we issue a clearance, and we said there's no section 1 there, and somebody else comes and does a report, then we're on the hook for it. And that's kind of the quick answer for you that I took a while to get to.
but that's specifically with like pests, like he said, with home inspections, there is no governance over it. So you don't come into it a lot where what we have our inspector come in and he, says X, Y, and Z, and somebody else comes in and says anything vastly different. I mean, I haven't had that experience. But I mean, if that is the case, the seller usually has their own inspection. That's what they use as disclosure. And if the buyer chooses to bring their own inspector in, as listing agents, we tell them that they can come in, but it's for information only. So we would say, yes, you can have your own inspection, but it's for informational purposes only. Like, this is the inspection that we set aside. This is the home that you wrote a contract on. Anything else above that, it could be a negotiation, but usually agents kind of talk through that with the buyer and the seller together.
Did you have an issue after you moved in?
Yeah, we
or
had
anything?
issues. I'm eager to know.
Nothing really. We've been there 32 years, and he designed the house. The civil engineer designed the house, and he did a pretty good job on it. It's just that I was a little leery about the guy was already shivering. It's like, well, are you working for him or are you working for me? It's like,
Well, and when I work with buyers, even if the seller did their own inspection, I'll recommend that my buyer does their own home inspection too. If I don't know that inspector, I'll say, if we want to do our own inspection, we completely have the right to do that, and this is who we use. And we can have our inspector go in and do their own inspection as well.
So we're not supposed to be swayed by the buyer or seller or the agents. And I mean, of course, everybody has their 2 cents they want to pitch in, whenever we're there about, oh, well, don't call that, or, maybe, could you come down on price on this or whatever. But, at the end of the day, we still have to call what's there, because if we don't call something that's damaged, we're gonna be liable for it. And we can't just make stuff up, because then again, somebody else is gonna come in and we're gonna start getting complaints. I mean, we have to do an accurate, thorough inspection, to be, reliable company that can also protect ourselves. So, yeah, we're not going in, like, we work with Steph and Jenny and a lot of agents pretty regularly.
We're not directing you to write
Yeah.
light. It's not worth your reputation, your license.
Exactly.
Sellers have a duty to disclose. We don't want a lawsuit coming back on you. It's just not worth it. The damages are what they are or not.
There are some kind of shady characters, unfortunately, that do try to really pull some strings certain directions, I think, on certain parts of the deals. I've never had that issue with any of these guys at all. So they've always, they ask questions, they make sure they're informed and they understand what we're talking about, which I think is great, but they've never tried to sway us to cover something up to protect their client, because it's always gonna come out.
Okay, I have another question in regards to the taxes you can take forward to the next house, and you said
Prop
it
19, yeah.
covers, Prop 19. What other states can you do that with? Is if my wife and I were to move, we don't necessarily want to give up the California climate, but sometimes the fact that we can buy an equivalent house for 20% of what it's worth around here, if we move back east someplace, can we take that with us there? Because the equity or the taxation difference between what we buy on the East Coast for $175,000 really changes the numbers as far as capital gains, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah.
are there any other states that would honor that kind of something similar to Prop 19?
You have to move as far east in California as you possibly can without getting to Nevada, or as far north as
No,
possible.
no.
That's about
You
it.
can't take,
It's not.
Yeah,
can't take it out of
Prop
California.
19 is a California statute, it's not a national. So,
Is there any recognition at all of that because of our age?
not that I know, of, but a good, like state attorney would be able to figure that out, but I don't believe there is.
Okay.
Something we-
All right, and I have another question in regards to fire insurance, because of all of the fire issues. Insurance has gotten so high, some insurance companies don't cover areas anymore, and we live near where you do, and we are certainly in a fire prone area. If someone who's getting a mortgage, if the bank won't, if they can't get fire insurance in that area, will the bank not give them a loan? Or do they have to go into a risk
Yeah.
pool, and then that drives, their monthly expenses way up? Well, then we don't qualify for the loan anymore because of the additional expense of fire insurance.
So fire insurance is interesting because over the last few years, you've seen a lot of companies that would otherwise insure in this area not insure anymore. It's become an issue with like the California State Insurance Board. But there's kind of a fail-safe involved. So this was called the California Fair Plan. And so what that is if you have insurance company, ABC Insurance Company, and they say, hey, we're dropping at the end of this year, what you could do is you could say, great, I need to then build two policies.
Right.
So policy one would be going to CFP, California Fair Plan. And they insure actually a wide variety. The biggest thing is fire. We'll say, great, we will guarantee you a fire insurance policy. It's super expensive. It's probably 3-4 times more than what you otherwise pay, but it's sometimes your only option. And you tend not to see it too much in Oakland, but a little bit in Oakland Hills right now. But mainly it's more like you start going north towards Sonoma, Napa, North Bay area.
Right.
And so you spend about 3 to 4 times more on that insurance policy. That only covers you for fire. It doesn't cover you for any other peril.
Right.
What you then have to purchase is what's called a DIC policy, difference in condition policy. And that will cover you for everything else. So that will cover you for water damage, hurricane, not that we have that here. It does not cover you for earthquake. It does not cover you for those are the 2 exceptions. It'll cover you for if someone robbed your house. It also includes all your liability coverages, all your loss of use coverages. And so the combination of those 2 policies then builds you basically a full policy, which then will allow the bank to underwrite that loan. So there are ways out of it. There are a few insurance companies that will kind of keep playing in that risk pool of, hey, we'll just build you one policy, but they're becoming very slim. You really have to do a lot of shopping and kind of know the right people.
Which is
Or we
that something you,
grandfathered into it, it's already kind of existing policy.
I'm saying those even fail.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
but is that something you have to disclose to potential buyers? I mean, we currently have our old insurance company, but if we ever left, we're with State Farm now and have been for quite a while. If we ever left them, we might have a hard time getting insurance from anybody, even if we broke our coverage with State Farm and then maybe we can't find anywhere else and we come back, they may say, sorry, you broke the contract, you're out the door. So then when a potential buyer comes by, do we tell them, well, you better check if you can get insurance before you buy?
Part of their buyer investigations that they're supposed to be doing. Jenna, or you wanted to jump in here as well, but that should be something that they're doing. A good buyer's agent, as part of their due diligence, should be advising their clients, okay, let's go get a quote from someone to see if that home
Right.
is insurable.
Right, yeah, the lender will require it. So fire insurance is absolutely required if you are mortgaging your home. And that's something that has to be put in place prior to us even sending the documents to
So
escrow.
do we just zip it and let their agent deal with that?
I would imagine if you're aware of it, you wanna bring that up, maybe in your disclosure, right, your seller disclosure. It is mandatory if you're mortgaging the home. If your property is in a flood zone, your realtor would have done their due diligence for flood cert, and they would know that, so you'd have to have flood insurance. You do not have to have earthquake insurance. The people that I see getting earthquake insurance are people moving into California from out of state, because it's kind of, in my opinion, a total scam, right? And considering 89 was the last time that happened, these policies can be $3,000-4,000 a year. And so there are certain insurance policies that you must have. Fire is definitely one of them, or else the lender will not lend. Yeah, you have to have that in place.
So when we go to list with the client, we will pull a lot of reports down, I mean, one of them with, the title, we want to look at that. We will also do, you have a number of advisories and disclosures that you need to make. We will do a natural hazard disclosure report. It's typically a seller cost, I think it's 99 or $125. And that will tell us, are we in a flood zone? Are we in a high fire zone, a very high fire zone? And that comes part of the package that we present to buyers as they're evaluating your home. And generally they're viewing those reports in advance of putting in an offer. So they're aware of your zones, all your advisories, all your disclosures in advance. So at the time they make that offer, it is based on all the information provided to them.
And our company has, and then we own an insurance brokerage, actually Guaranteed Rate has an insurance brokerage. And so for my clients, if there's a question of whether or not they can obtain a cost-effective premium, we can actually get that information up front. We can have our insurance agents run that and say, okay, this is, these are A, B, and C companies, and this is what it's going to cost. Because that can impact qualification, right? If their insurance premium is higher and their debt to income ratio is kind of on the line, they may not qualify for the mortgage.
Extra $300-400 a month in insurance costs could change whether you buy a house.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't, but
Right.
it's only possible. I'm glad you mentioned insurance. I want to segue that a smidge, which is a few things, right? So let's say you sell your house and move into your house, and say you buy that house outright. There's no one telling you, oh, you got to make sure you get insurance because it's the bank is requiring it.
Correct.
So make sure you get insurance on your new property that you buy if you don't have a loan. And as well as if you decide to, move and rent out your old property, two things. One, you got to make sure that you turn your existing homeowner's policy into a landlord policy. It looks very similar, but it's technically a different type of policy. And make sure that your tenants also have what's called renter's insurance, so that in the event they burn down the house, you have some sort of mitigation against that. And then along with those lines, if you decide to sell your house and then go rent a new place, make sure you get rental insurance because life happens. And so real life story, you burn down the kitchen, your policy will step in so that you aren't on the hook for those repairs. So don't forget about insurance. It's commonly missed, but very important detail.
You all work with real estate lawyers?
We have them that we can refer you to.
Going back, if I may,
Yeah,
to the for sale by owner, right?
Ah.
Because being, of course, on the buy side, there is the occasional client who goes directly to the seller of a property, or even uses, their own buyer's agent, smartly, right? That's the smart thing to do. But then the seller doesn't want to pay, commissions, right? They don't want to pay that 2.5% or 3%, whatever it might be, because they're thinking, well, I can save that money on the commissions, right? Almost every contract I've gotten when a buyer has gone to a seller and it's a for sale by owner, the appraisal comes in much higher, right? So now the seller has given up, some of that equity because they've decided they didn't want to pay commissions. And it's usually pretty substantial. I mean, I've seen them come in like $50,000-$80,000 over what they're selling their home for. So they're gonna save themselves 2.5%, but they're missing out on $80,000 in extra equity. I have one going on right now, actually. The appraisal came in higher. And the seller had given them $25,000 in concessions for closing costs. And they negotiated an extra $1,000 off of the inspection. So now I have this big variance on the appraisal. So they've given up the equity. And also they've credited, $26,000. That's a huge difference. So when you're selling your house, use a listing agent, even if it's going to cost you an extra couple percent, you're going to be giving away the farm, really.
And you've taken on probably a full-time job trying to do this
Full-time
yourself.
job,
And
exactly.
have you reached the full scope of, are you a marketer? Can you go out
Right.
and reach the marketplace the way that, the city agents can with the
Right.
MLS and syndication?
And the liability of not disclosing properly or
All
any
the
of that.
forms,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
What's the saying, you're your worst, you're your worst attorney or something like that?
right,
Yeah,
exactly,
so-
exactly.
Any discussion about if your home is computerized. In other words, like fiber optic is coming in these areas. And there's, your alarm systems, do you have your fuse box upgraded so that you can handle an electric car, all this type of stuff. Is there quite a need for that from buyers? Are they looking for that, or are they more interested in the way the kitchens and the bathrooms look?
There definitely are some buyers, probably if Mark was buying your house. You would make sure that your wiring was all, but I mean, as long as everything is safe and you have access, there are some homes that we know are in like, that they don't get good like Wi-Fi reception, that can be an issue for some people, but in the most part, buyers aren't, that's not something that they're concentrating on. And it's like, having the proper outlet to charge a car is an easy fix for an electrician to do for somebody. That's not something that as a seller, you should really be worried about, as long as your electrical panel is safe. There's always upgrades that a buyer is gonna, want to come in and do, but that's not something you need to, lose sleep on over at night at all.
So having these things, these amenities in your home, I think it just makes your home more attractive, especially if we're talking
Yeah.
about today's younger, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennial buyers, like fiber, great, EV charger, fantastic. You just made that home more attractive to me. However, in the case when we were speaking about what upgrades would we recommend to someone renovating their home, I'm not going to necessarily advise them, well, you should put in an EV charger. If you don't already have one, I'm probably not going to advise you that that's something you're going to get a good return on to do. But if you already have it, great, let's market that. That could be a differentiator to attract someone to your home or have them want it more than another. So it's marketing.
Great question.
How much does a view add, I mean, the dramatic view, add to the value of a house? I mean, we live in similar neighborhoods and, we have a very dramatic view and, it like sold the house and we thought, but my wife says, yeah, that adds this much. And to me, it was a deal catcher. As soon as we got a view, I
That's
said,
the
this is the
value,
one.
that's the value right here. Someone's gonna
There
move
you
in
go.
and fall. And
Yeah.
every house that they go to after will be like, that Bob's house. It's gonna be one of those. There might not be a dollar
dollar
amount
amount.
attached to it, but it's the wow factor that your home will be the comparison for everything else. And if they go to a house where they're looking into somebody else's yard, it's more. I mean, I'm sure you could pull up actual data of homes on this street looking out over this, if it's a
Yeah.
little bit different, but.
I think it's part of the story. So we come in and we're trying to tell a story about your home, right? And this is even when we're bringing in the stager, like if you have a view, they're going to see that. They're going to open up the furniture and the space to be able to create that environment that's what's drawing people in. So that's just part of us going in and evaluating the magic of your particular home and the story that we're going to be telling. And maybe that's the first photograph we show on the MLS, because we know that's going to grab, a buyer's eye, that it's in the first 2 or 3 photos. It's not down in photo number 53. So it's part of us knowing what we're doing. What are the the most amazing features of your home that we're gonna highlight. To have it speak to those buyers and
One
speak
of
to
the
our
reasons we bought our home, actually.
There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, we have a great view. We have a great view, and it, for us, it was like game over. That was, yeah, we like,
So let's heighten the mood of that, yeah.
Trees are a big issue. And- I
Whether-
live in a neighborhood that has lots of trees. Some people, I mean, they're all fighting over it. But, you know,
yeah. We're hoping and
That's
praying 2 trees are below neighbor fall down.
I mean,
Go put a rusty nail in it.
I mean, a lot of people had used 30 years ago, they no longer have to use. It's a trees are all there.
We have friends that live over in Oakland, like on the way down to Berkeley, and they have this amazing, I mean, you can see the full bay, the city is a spectacular home. And the woman who lives across the street from them had a giant, I mean, a giant I think it was I don't think it was a redwood, but it was a significant tree. And when they went to her and they were asking, when my husband and I bought this house, we planted this tree and blah, 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 they ended up, them and the people behind them who also have that same view, ended up paying her a lot of money to take it down, to get rid of it.
So I just helped a buyer last week, close on a property in Berkeley, and part of the CCNRs were for her purchase, that she needs to maintain her vegetation. It can't go above a certain level because it would block the view of the person behind her. So again, it's us as realtors doing a good job and knowing all the things. She may have wanted to grow the trees taller, sorry, I need to help call this out to you to make sure as part of your purchase, you're okay with knowing you have some responsibility and some costs involved on a yearly basis to be trimming your trees, so the person behind you keeps their view. More questions? Well, this has been great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panel. Thank you, audience.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, welcome. Lot of material back here, so help yourselves.
Right,
Take some
everybody.
donuts, have a great.
Yeah.